Welcome to the Sanity Project Podcast, where you can awaken your mind to clarity and success even in today's life challenges. We're here to provide insights and solutions that will help you live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hello, everybody. This is Joanne Victoria with another amazing episode of the Sanity Project Podcast. You're here to discover a life of clarity, confidence, sanity, and entrepreneurial success. Our guest today is Danny Brassell. Danny is, among other things, an author, and he's written a book called Leadership Begins with Motivation. I don't know what motivation you need to read. You just pick up that book and go. A highly sought-after speaker, trainer, and coach known as, quote, Jim Carrey with the PhD, Dr. Danny Brassell has spoken to over 3,500 audiences worldwide and authored 16 books, including his latest, Leadership Begins with Motivation. He is the co-founder of thereadinghabit.com, the world's top reading engagement program, and welcome to the show, Danny Brassell.
Thanks so much for having me, Joanne. More importantly, thanks for spreading some joy in the world. We need a lot more of you.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. So tell us, how did you decide that you wanted everybody to read?
Well, it's kind of ironic, Joanne, because I'm now considered one of America's leading reading ambassadors, and yet I grew up hating reading. My father was a public librarian. I always hated the public library growing up. The furniture was uncomfortable. It always smelled funny in there. There was always some elderly woman telling me to be quiet. There was always some freaky homeless guy hanging out by the bookshelves who thought he was a vampire. I never liked the library. And it wasn't until I started teaching in the inner city and I noticed that a lot of my students didn't have a lot of the advantages I had growing up. I mean, Joanne, I grew up lower middle class, but we always had food on the table. Both my parents were in the home, and my parents read in front of us kids, to us kids, and we had plenty of access to reading materials. And I said, shame on me. And so it really became a passion of mine to really expose kids of all ages to great literature, to get them excited to become lifelong learners, not just school learners.
Well, I was telling you before the show how my father broke down my door. I was reading in my room, and I always read in my room at night, and I still do. And he said, if you don't get rid of that book under your blanket, I'm going to break this door down. And he did. And to this day, I don't know why it irritated him so. I know he wasn't a reader, but still, it was really odd. And I mean, it sounds odd. Somebody breaks the door down, but really odd. Until to this day,
he may have felt threatened by you becoming a reader.
I think so. In retrospect, I figured that out a few years ago. He may have become threatened. And I read, oh God, I have a Kindle now. So, and during the pandemic, getting the books was hard. Oh God, I can't tell you the amount of money I spent on books because you couldn't get any. And I remember I got a Kindle and you could download as much as you wanted. And I just do that. And it's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the questions people ask me when I'm doing live trainings is ebooks or real books. And my answer is always yes. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm kind of old school. I like a physical book in my hand, but my wife, she loves her Kindle, and I'll make arguments on why Kindle's the greatest thing. I mean, three things in particular. First of all, my wife is from Singapore, and so every other summer we fly back to Singapore to visit her family. And while I'm busily packing 20 books in my suitcase, she's packing a 1 pound, 6 ounce Kindle, which has access to the entire world's library. Secondly, we both like reading in beds like it sounds like you do, but I always have to have a lamp on. It drives my wife crazy because her Kindle illuminates itself. She doesn't need a lamp. And then finally, I'm getting kind of old nowadays. At this point, chop off my head and count the rings. And my vision's not so good. And it's not a problem with a Kindle because you can adjust the font size on things. So there's all kinds of great benefits to having a Kindle. And you already identified it, is that, in a time when it was so difficult to actually get books during the pandemic, at least the Kindle was our saving grace.
Yeah, the transition was not easy.
Yeah.
I want to let you know that, because I want to let the listeners know that, because even though the real books, the hard copy books, were not available at the library because the library was shut down, and I bought the books online at so many different places, and it was like, then my daughter goes, "Use your Kindle." I said, "No. I have to read the real thing, the real book." And she said, "No, it's okay. You'll be fine." But she's always telling me that. Mm-hmm. And then I think, okay, let's just try it. And I tried it, and I worked my way into it. And now I wouldn't give it up, because it's just very easy, very easy. Makes it easy for me to read as many books as I want. And I do read a lot, at several books at one time.
That's great.
What are you doing now?
Well, I go around the world speaking all over, trying to teach parents all kinds of ideas on how to get their kids excited about reading. I mean, I think schools do an adequate job of teaching kids how to read. But the question I always ask people is, what good is it teaching a kid how to read if they never want to read? I teach kids why to read, because I've never had to tell a kid, go watch TV. I have never had to tell a kid, go play a video game. And I never want to have to tell a kid, go read. I want them to choose to do it because it's fun. Unfortunately, I think kids are being force-fed a curricula that doesn't individualize by the student's taste and preference. And so I love to work with parents and just show them a lot of easy tips that they can use to get their kids excited about reading. You and I, when we were talking beforehand, you were talking about how you were a reader and your brother wasn't. Well, that's not atypical. 4 out of 5 struggling and reluctant readers are boys. I mean, little boys and little girls are very different. I mean, little girls will read books about little boys. Little boys don't like reading books about little girls. I mean, there's a few exceptions. There's a great, in one of the Diary of the Wimpy Kid books, I can't remember which one, but Jeff Kinney is one of my favorite authors. But Greg Capley's mother decides she's going to have a mother-son book club. And so she invites all the neighborhood boys to come to her house and bring a book. And so the mother, she's brought Anne of Green Gables and Little House on the Prairie and Sarah Plain and Tall. And the boys have brought, dinosaur books, the Book of Bodily Functions, How to Cheat at Video Games. And I'm like, that's so true. That's exactly the way it is. And that's really my tip to all the parents listening out there, is the research is very clear on this. It doesn't matter what you read. What matters is how much you read. It doesn't matter if you're reading James Joyce or James and the Giant Peach. People who read more read better. And here's a tip for everybody listening. The little boy who only reads Captain Underpants is going to be a better reader than the little boy who refuses to read anything. Captain Underpants is actually the gateway drug to Shakespeare, but we got to get him hooked first.
Wow. Yeah, I never thought there was a psyche to this. I just thought you either liked to read or you didn't. Because even currently, I have a grandson, and have you read this? I don't read. Okay. Can I give you a book to read? No. There's all these little boy things, and he won't do a thing about it. And now I see why.
Well, you can read aloud to them. That's the single best way to improve reading is to be read. I'm one of these dorks that's actually read every government report of the last 100 years. They're always 2,000 pages long. Becoming a nation of readers, why Johnny can't read, the National Reading Panel, and all these reports. It's always around page 100 where there's a simple little paragraph that says, the research seems to suggest the single best way to improve reading is to be read aloud to. And it never mentions it again because it sounds way too simple. One of my friends and mentors, Jim Trelease, who passed away this past summer, he wrote the Read Aloud Handbook. And he said, if reading aloud costs $129, every parent in America would rush out and buy it. And if we found out kids didn't like it, they would mandate it in the public school system tomorrow.
Oh. That's too bad that he had to go.
No, yeah, he was great. He's the best speaker I've ever seen, and a good human being even more.
Well, you have to have a sense of humor when you're doing this, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, to the people out there listening, Joanne, I mean, you're not alone. I hear this all the time. Oh, my kid won't hear. I'll give you a quick tip. This is for every parent out there. This is the easiest tip I can give you. So, President Bush Sr., about 30 years ago, signed a very important law in the United States. It said every single television set in America has to have closed captioning. Here's a quick tip for every parent out there. Turn on the closed captioning on the TV. Now, when I'm doing a live training with parents, a parent will raise their hand and say, wait a second, if the show is in English and the subtitles are in English, what good does that do? I'm like, well, that's a fair point, but let me make a point. Have you ever watched a show with subtitles and not looked at those subtitles? It's actually very difficult to do. Your brain's actually directed towards that text. And there's actually research to support this. If you look at reading scores around the world, the more kids watch TV, the lower their reading scores are in every single country of the world except for one. The country with the highest reading scores in the world actually watches the most TV in the world. Oh. It's Finland. And people always ask, well, how can that be? I'm like, well, Finland makes really bad TV shows. And so they have to import all these old American sitcoms like Gilligan's Island and Brady Bunch, and they subtitle them in Finnish. The kids are reading all the time. So that's a quick, easy tip that any parent can use to get their kids reading a little bit more.
That's amazing. I know of my own children, I have one who reads all the time, one who reads sometime, and one who doesn't read at all.
Yep. And and that's what everybody, different strokes for different folks. So I have 3 kids and my wife. And so here's a tip for everybody. Have different books you read with each person. It makes them feel special. So my oldest daughter, she's into this fantasy series, Shadows and Fog. And so we're reading those together. My son is into the Civil War. And so we're finishing up The Killer Angels by Michael Shera about the Battle of Gettysburg. And my youngest daughter, for some reason, she loves literature. And so we just finished one of my least favorite books of all time, The Great Gatsby. I hate that book, but she liked it. Actually reading it to her, I'm like, oh, at least I can appreciate the writing now by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And now we're reading, it's even trickier, is Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. I don't know if you've ever actually read the book, but it is tough. There is a lot of vocabulary. I'm just trying to imagine people in the 18th century being able to read Oliver Twist, but maybe they did. Maybe it's the dumbing down of society. And then my wife, she loves the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon, and so we read those together. And so that's an extra little incentive for, so I was going to say with your grandson, depending on what age he is, like make that your special time. With my kids, I established the habit because I think TV's here to stay. And so I allow my kids to watch TV, but the price of admission is they have to bring me something to read. And so when they were little, they'd bring me picture books and we read the picture book and then they could turn on the TV. Now they're all teenagers. And so they'll bring me like some article on their iPad and we'll read that together and then they can turn on the TV. It's these simple little habits. That's my entire reading engagement program. There's 2 numbers I want everybody to remember. The first number is 67. So a lot of people will tell you it takes 21 days to change a habit. And to those people, I say, well, show me the research on that. It's a completely fabricated number. I know exactly where the number comes from, actually. It's from a wonderful book written in 1960 by Dr. Maxwell Maltz called Psychocybernetics. Now, yes. Dr. Maltz was a plastic surgeon, and Joanne, in the preface of the book, he said he noticed it took most of his patients 21 days to get used to their new faces. Well, a lot of self-help gurus, a lot of people I actually respect, by the way, they started telling people it takes 21 days to change a habit. And there's actually no research to support this. Well, in 2009, the University of London did a habit formation study, and they found it took anywhere from 18 to 254 days to change a habit, and the average was 66 days. Well, I don't like the number 66, so I threw in a bonus day. 67 days to change a habit. It actually depends on the type of habit you're trying to change. So, for example, if you want to start drinking a glass of water before breakfast in the morning, that might take you 18 days to make that into a habit. But if you want to quit smoking, that's going to take 254 days to change that habit. And here's why this is important, Joanne. Let's say you go on a diet, you follow it religiously for 21 days. Well, then on day 22, you fall off the wagon. Well, you blame yourself, and that's bogus because the research shows it takes, on average, at least 3 times longer than that to establish a habit. So that's the first number I want everybody listening to hear. 67 days, just over 2 months to change the habit. The second number is 20. So researchers were looking at student reading scores around the world, and they were trying to figure out common characteristics of students worldwide, and they found one that just blew them away. It was the number of minutes spent reading outside of school. So they looked at the low students, the average students, and the high students. So the kids in the 20th percentile, the lowest students, your F failing students, they average less than a minute a day of reading outside of school. Well, that didn't surprise anybody. That's probably why they're at the bottom of the class. But this next number did startle the researchers. The kids in the middle of the class, in the 70th percentile, your C students, your average students, Their average is 9.6 minutes a day reading outside of school. And so if I'm doing a live training with parents, this is when the room gets real quiet and the first hand raised and a parent asks, wait a second, Danny, are you saying if I can get my kid to read 10 minutes a day at home, I can take him from an F to a C? That's exactly what I'm saying. There's a lot of research to support this, but this one really blew away the researchers. The kids near the top of the class, A- students, 90th percentile, do they spend 3 hours a day reading outside of school? No. Do they spend an hour a day outside of school reading for fun? No. The average was just over 20 minutes a day. So this is the number I'm going for with parents, is 20 minutes a day. And here's the two things that are going to make everybody thrilled out there. First of all, they don't have to be consecutive. So you can do 3 minutes here, 1 minute here, 4 minutes there, because people are busy. And secondly, the research shows that being read aloud to is just as good as reading on your own. And this is important because I work with a lot of dyslexic students. And so just so people know out there, all reading disabilities are curable. And dyslexia is probably the most undiagnosed reading disability out there. Actually, a lot of people don't know this. Over half of the Fortune 500 CEOs are dyslexic. And dyslexics actually process a lot better auditorially through their ears. And so these people are just loving audible books, books on tape, things that are being read aloud to them. So that's my tip for everybody out there. If you're driving your kid to school, to and from school every day, and it's a 10-minute commute, you can cover your 20 minutes just to and from school by putting in an audible book. And I mean, that's another thing I love about your Kindle. Your Kindle has the option of reading it aloud to you.
Wow. That's a lot of tip.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm kind of diarrhea. Long answers to short questions.
No, that's fine. That's fine. But I'm listening and I'm listening and I'm listening because that's profound information, the 21 day versus the 67 day to change a goal. And that's to change a habit. That's huge.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell everybody you said that.
Yeah, and that's the big thing, Joanne. I mean, and this is as simple as I can get with people, because I work with some of the parents I work with don't know how to read themselves, and just by working with me, they can get their kids to be readers, and the kids start to figure out their parents actually are illiterate. It's amazing. But here's the simple tip. Interest drives reading. So good parents, good teachers are eavesdropping. So if your kid is talking about NASCAR, get them NASCAR books. If they're talking about J-Lo, get them a biography on Jennifer Lopez. Again, it doesn't matter what you read. What matters is how much you read. I was working with a third grade teacher, and she had this boy, Mario, and she told me, Mario won't read anything. I'm like, I'll get Mario reading within an hour. I was wrong, Joanne. It actually only took 20 minutes. And the book I handed Mario, he liked it so much, Joanne, that by the next week he had memorized the first chapter.
Oh.
The book I handed Mario was called Just Disgusting by Andy Griffiths, not the Sheriff of Mayberry. This is an Australian author. He wrote The Day My Butt Went Psycho. And the first chapter of Just Disgusting is the 101 most disgusting things. I don't remember all of them, but I can remember some of them. So it's like number 12, dog poop. Number 13, stepping in dog poop. Number 14, trying to wipe the dog poop off your shoe and getting it on your fingers. Number 15, eating a hot dog that tastes like dog poop. Number 16, realizing the hot dog tastes like dog poop because you forgot to wash your hands.
Oh, my God.
That's how you get a little boy excited about reading. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Little Women's a wonderful book, but if you want a little boy to read it, you need to put vomit and diarrhea in the title. That's what gets little boys excited about reading. And so that's what we got to do. We have to pay attention to what kids are interested in. And, some kids actually prefer being read aloud to. I don't have a problem with that. I'll read aloud to them all. To me, it's the most precious time in the world. I think it was Emily Buckwald said, children are made readers on the laps of their parents. And I've probably asked tens of thousands of people, how did you learn how to read? And I have never once had a person say, oh, my grandmother, Nana, she used to sit me on her lap in her rocking chair, and we'd rock back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And she'd open up the book, smile at me, point at those words, and go, alligator, ball. No, I've never heard a person say that's how they learned how to read, but that's how it's being taught in a lot of schools. I don't think that's how the kids are learning how to read. I think they're learning how to read because grandma or auntie or mom or dad that they're being read aloud to, and you're learning so many things when you're being read aloud to. I mean, first of all, it's great time together, but there's just things. When I was doing my dissertation, I basically had to interview 7,000 preschoolers. I had to give them this assessment called the Concepts About Print Test by Marie Clay, who just passed away. She's from New Zealand, wonderful researcher, and it's basically a test where there's things that when you're reading with a kid, you don't realize you're doing, but a kid's paying attention. So, for example, the kids learn which part of the book. Oh, this is the up part. This is the down part. Oh, here's the cover. Oh, I turn the pages left to right. Oh, I read like a typewriter, not like a snake swirling around. Oh, the pictures sometimes help me figure out the words. There's all kinds of things you can learn just by observing. And kids are paying a lot more attention. Noam Chomsky used to do this where, he proved that there's ways that kids are processing language without being explicitly taught. And so the way you do that is you model something proper to a kid, and then you use an irregular to have them model it back to you. So I say, I walked today, I walked yesterday. And now you ask a 3-year-old, now you do it with the word run. And they'll say, I run today, I runned yesterday. Ooh, that's interesting. You see that, Joanne? Without me teaching past tense,
right?
Picked up on it. Now, they used it incorrectly because I gave them an irregular verb, but you see how the brain's processing that? They didn't have to be explicitly taught that. And I'm not putting down explicitly teaching things to kids. Believe me, everybody's a little bit different. But I'm saying that when there's this argument now, they call it the science of reading. I'm like, the science of reading is nothing new. It's the latest package on the same product. If you want to learn how to read, knowing the sounds of some of the blends can be somewhat helpful. And if you want to learn how to read, having opportunities to read for fun can also be somewhat helpful. But, it always depends on the kid. Some kids love doing phonics worksheets. Some kids just want to, you're like my dream student, Joanne. I love my little girls that'll just sit there with a flashlight in bed at night, reading to their heart's delight. I mean, that's what we really want for all kids.
There's so much to learn, and you can only learn it by being able to read.
Amen.
Okay, so you have here that your mission is to help people read more, read better, and love reading. And I guess you got that accomplished for the most part.
Oh, yeah. Reading shouldn't be a drag. It should always be fun. So that's the big thing I'm always trying to train parents is this has to be fun. If you want to establish a habit, I mean, yeah, if you look at like military research, I believe pressure can create short-term change, but I really don't believe long-term lasting change happens unless you choose to do it on your own. If you look at intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, I want kids to do it because they love it, not because they're forced to do it. Because when you're forced to do something, the moment you're free, you stop doing it.
Right.
And, I have friends that graduated from prestigious Ivy League universities that love to brag to me that they haven't read a book since college. And I have friends that didn't even graduate high school, and they're some of the most avid readers I know. I mean, that's what I want to be around people like that, is
right.
People that are informed.
Right. It's real and authentic.
Absolutely.
So you gave me a few tips. You gave the audience a few tips. What tips more can you give our audience today? What can they do?
Yeah, so that's really the whole program is every single day first of all, I wanted to give as a thank you for bearing with me and listening to my monologues. I wanted to give you and your listeners a gift. So if you go to freegiftfromdanny.com, again, freegiftfromdanny.com, I'm going to give you two things. First of all, I'm going to give everybody a complimentary e-copy of my book, Read, Lead, and Succeed. This is a book I wrote for a school principal who was trying to keep his faculty and staff positively engaged. So I said, okay, I'll write you a book. So every week I give you a concept, an inspirational quote, an inspirational story, a book recommendation on a book you should read, but you're probably too lazy because you're an adult. So I also give you a children's picture book recommendation. Demonstrates the same concept. You can read that in 5 minutes. And then I'm also going to give everybody access to last summer. I did a 5-day reading challenge online for about 700 parents from around the world, where every day for an hour, I just give you a whole bunch of different tips like I've been given here on ways to get your kid excited about reading at home. Because the more excited you are to read, the the more likely you are to read, and the more you read, the better you get. And that's really what I want to stress. So if you go to freegiftfromdanny.com, those are my gifts to you. And this basically, my reading engagement program, the readinghabit.com, is basically in just over 2 months, every single day, parents are receiving about a 5 to 7 minute video from me, giving them some ideas on ways to get their kids engaged. And the parent does it with their kid. They answer questions, and we check out the progress. And my favorite part of the program, Joanne, is after 67 days, I'm like, hey, you've been doing this for 20 minutes a day for 67 days. I know your kid is reading more. I know they're reading better. Most importantly, I know that they love reading. But here's the bonus that I didn't tell you at the beginning. I just gave you 20 minutes a day paying attention to your kid. How many of us wouldn't have died for 20 minutes of positive attention from a parent when we were kids? I just gave you the gift of time, which for some reason, I think we're in just such a busy world. We're not focused on the important things anymore.
The gift of time. That is amazing.
Yeah. Oh, and I'll give you one more here. I'll give you one more tip, Joanne. So this is the thing I tell people. I'm like, everybody has a cell phone, and everybody's griping about cell phones. I don't believe it ever helps to resist technology. I'm a big believer in utilizing technology to my advantage. And so I always tell people, when used properly, the cell phone can be a wonderful literacy tool. So what I do is, on my calendar, I have daily reminders. And so reminders about different things. So, for example, I'm always amazed when like a Christian can sit there and quote scripture to me. I've never been able to do that. And so I've been forcing myself to do that. So like right now, I'm trying to learn Deuteronomy 8:18. So every morning at 8:18, I get a reminder to memorize Deuteronomy 8:18, which is remember the Lord your God. He is the one who gives you the power to be successful in order to fulfill the covenant he confirmed to your ancestors with an oath. Hey, got it. All right.
There you
go. I've been trying to learn. I love the St. Crispian Day speech from King Henry V, which is in Act 4, Scene 4. So every day at 4:04, I have a reminder where I go through that. That's a very long monologue. It's about 50 lines. So it's, what's he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland? No, I'm not going to go through the whole thing for you. I got married on December 20th, and so every day at 12:20, I have a reminder to write a little love text to my wife to tell her how much I love her. But see, the phone can be a wonderful literacy tool if you use it that way. Oh, when I read Dune, there's this thing called the Litany Against Fear. So I would give myself a reminder every morning at 9:11. It would go, I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. When the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. See, I remember that. So that's one of the things. And that kind of comes from Miss Witt was my 8th grade English teacher. Miss Witt was about 183 years old. She's about 4 feet tall. Her teeth remind you of summer. Some are here, some are there. And Miss Witt used to she always made us memorize lines from Shakespeare and lines from poems. And I'm a very old man now, and I still remember all the things I memorized from Miss Witt. We don't do that for kids anymore. I think there might be some benefit. I mean, I look at like the research of the POWs in Vietnam. That's how they kept themselves occupied, is they'd memorize like verses from the Bible and books and things like that, and they would just recite them to one another. So there's some value in that.
Well, I'm sure our audience is totally enthralled and could probably listen to you for days, as I could, because it's just powerful information. And in our last minute here, what would you say to our audience?
Go out and get something to read. There's a great Spanish proverb that says, how lovely it is to do nothing and then rest afterward. I think there's nothing wrong with spending a really lazy afternoon behind a really good book. So I encourage everybody, and it doesn't have to be a book, by the way. Reading can also be, it can be People Magazine. It can be the Washington Post. It can be, whatever you want it to do. But the point is to make reading a daily habit.
Thank you. And I hope everybody who's listening runs out and gets another book. Take care, Daniel. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joanne. God bless.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project Podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com to listen to more podcasts. Check out Joanne's coaching programs and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Life-Work Harmony. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.